very good evening. A very good evening. A very good evening. A very good evening. A very good evening to everyone watching this program today, and a warm welcome to our panelists. Mr. A very good evening to everyone watching this program today, and a warm welcome to our panelists. Meghalaya has a very good evening to everyone watching this program today, and Meghalaya has a very good evening to everyone watching this program today. In the past week, after Meghalaya has a very good evening to everyone watching this program today. In the past
I think someone has an extra instrument on that's echoing.
So very good evening and welcome once again. There was a bit of a technical snag, but no problem. Welcome to all our panelists. So very good evening and welcome once again. There was a bit of a technical snag myself, but I think I can continue. Welcome to all our panelists. So very good evening and welcome once again. There was a bit of a technical snag myself, but I think I can continue. Okay. Welcome to all our panelists. So very good evening. Okay, once again, welcome. I think there was a bit of a technical snag, which I think is bound to happen. So today's program is something which I think all of us need to engage with. All of us in Meghalaya have been very troubled by the PGI report, where we found ourselves second last only to Ladakh in the grading system as far as our education is concerned, and which is why we thought of having this important discussion today. And we are very pleased that we have among our panelists Raymond Kharjana, who is the Education Secretary of the Khasi Students' Union, one of the largest membership-based students' union in the state. We know that they take up several other issues, including education, and after the PGI report, have been one of the organizations that have petitioned the government about this dismal performance of Meghalaya. We're also happy to have our friends from Rajasthan. Nikhil Day is very familiar in this part to people in this part of the world. He's been to Shillong and engaged in several of our campaigns. As you know, Nikhil is a founding member of the MKSS and has been involved in various campaigns around the country, most notable being fighting for the law, the RTI law, as well as getting the right to work in the form of the NREGA. And now Nikhil and his group, along with other groups in the country, are looking at how to strengthen democratic institutions, especially in terms of public audits, social audits, and bringing in accountability. So the other panelists, welcome Yogendra ji and Sasha. They are from the organization called Bodh, an organization which works on education for several decades. And they have been engaged with the government in ensuring equitable and quality education and have vast experience in what we should be doing in Meghalaya. And our friends on the panel today are from Rajasthan for a specific reason, that being that earlier Rajasthan was part of the BIMARU states, where their indicators were dismal as well, including education, but now have managed to pull up Rajasthan, especially in the field of education. And in this report, Rajasthan is way up. So we would like to learn from them and know more. So without wasting more time, because it's just a 1-hour program, and also we want to give opportunity to our viewers to send in questions for our panelists to answer. So let us begin straight away with asking the Education Secretary of the Khasi Students' Union to take us through this PGI report and what it means and all of that. Kharjana.
A part of the I would like to thank every panelist. Coming to the PGI report, it was during last week when it came to the notice of the union that the education department has released the PGI report for the academic year 2019-2020. At first, we were very dejected since Meghalaya is considered to be the educational hub of Northeast. But seeing our state at the bottom of the table, we are very dejected. And there are some who claims that there's an improvement, and it is true to some extent. But if we go deep and detail in the PGI report, we'll find that we are lacking in many domains. We are lacking in many domains, and we fail to address and focus on the area that we are lacking. For instance, if you see the PGI report, you will see if you go to domain number 1, that is the learning outcome, you will find that it has been remained stagnant for the past 3 years. The scores has not been increased, and where domain scores have been increased, the increasing rate has been very slow. If you see at the if you go to the different parameters of the domain, you will find that in the learning outcome of you will see that the average math scores, average language scores in class 3, class 5, and class 8. The average is only 14 out of 20. If you go to access, you will find that the net enrollment ratio of the state has scored only 5 out of 10. If you go to infrastructure, you'll find that percentages of school having computer aided learning is only 4 out of 20, and secondary school having integrated science a lab is only 4 out of 10. So these are the areas I think this we as a state should focus more if we want to rise in the PGI report card.
Right. I think Kharjana has highlighted some of those parameters. 70 parameters, I think, were used: learning outcomes, access, infrastructure, equity, governance, and it's a grading system. So we got just between 600 and 650 out of 1,000. And as far as improvement is concerned, apparently we improved just by 5% as compared to Arunachal, which had this huge improvement from the last time they did this grading in 2017-18. And we see that states like Andaman and Nicobar also has done so well. So now may I ask Yogendra Bhushan ji, what do you think of this report? Are such reports useful? And what is the secret of Rajasthan being up there on this report?
First, I would like to say that we at Bodh have very little information or knowledge about the situation at the grassroots in Meghalaya. So we will not be very authentic in our statements. So I will not like to comment upon the situation in Meghalaya. But apparently it comes out of this report that in all the 5 indicators, five domains, most of the against most of the parameters, Meghalaya's performance is very dismal. And another thing is, what about Rajasthan? And you have asked the relevance of such reports. Regarding Rajasthan, we will like to state that definitely last 10 years, there was a movement for improving the scenario in the elementary education or the school education domain, largely led by the bureaucracy. So it is a very different type of phenomenon that if you have resources at your disposal and a very committed bureaucracy is ready to take on the challenges, so they can make differences with regards to the scenario or situation on the grassroots. So that's an example of the effort and the endeavor of a committed bureaucracy. I would like to say only this about the report. And but there are again certain issues which we are not so comfortable about the performance of Rajasthan so far. The domain or indicators of outcomes are concerned. So we at Bodh feel, while partnering with the government of Rajasthan last 10 years very intensively in their initiatives for improving the quality of education, that these things are somehow being coached or tutored to produce a definite type of results. So I am saying this upfront because other states might not be so conscious, have lack in the efforts of trying to get certain results in their favor or show a very different picture or against the reality of the larger reality of their state. So one is that point. The another aspect I would like to say about these reports that regarding the learning outcomes, we have so many parallel independent researches and studies coming out nationally and internationally. And both are very categorically stating that not only in Rajasthan or Meghalaya or elsewhere, in general in India, the performance levels of or academic outcomes in the elementary education or specifically in primary educations are very, very low. And our own national surveys done by civil society, many are very well known, like ASAR. They have been doing it from last 10 years. And now they are being corroborated by international studies and surveys. Very recently, World Bank has also produced a report stating that India figures in the lowest performing countries in the world, in the globe, so far as school education is concerned. So while looking these two things, the report produced by the government of India, while saying that many of the states have, most of the states have improved a lot, and some has really come at very top five. They have mentioned five is almost done the optimal results in many of their domains. So where is the actually triangulation or corroboration? So independent researches in national and international are saying you are still very, very behind so far as the international standards are concerned or very desirable levels are concerned. So that is a larger question with regards to the validity or reliability of these sort of reports in general. I would like, if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with what Yogenji is saying, because we need to take all of this with a pinch of salt, because they are very standardized assessments which happen annually, conducted by NCRT, and therefore, in terms of methodology, there is a good methodology, but you can sort of manufacture also a kind of result if you can at scale make children prepare for these kind of assessments. So I think we need to understand this scenario with pinch of salt, but not disregarding the attempt which took place after right to education was introduced in Rajasthan. It was a very sincere attempt that we witnessed, especially led by the bureaucracy heading the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and then later on, expanding its wings and bringing all the related departments, the directorate, the SCERT, into it, and then trying to generate a momentum. That is true. So therefore, it's a mix of things, and there is an underlying politics of it that we need to also understand. And I hope, as we'll also move in discussion, and we'll try and understand more about what happened in Rajasthan, we can put in more.
Yeah, so surely, I mean, we will take this report with a pinch of salt, but I don't think that we could prepare for a report card indicating failure. So anyhow, if I can move on to Nikhil. Yogendra ji and Sasha ji has talked about a committed bureaucracy in Rajasthan, which has also helped usher in a change. But can you tell us about what the state of affairs was in the education sector in Rajasthan and how it improved, and what were the key factors that led to that improvement?
For 35 years, I think so have I, in different domains. And he's, of course, one of the doyens of education in Rajasthan, as several of them. And there have been repeated attempts from the broader civil society to work on education in the state. What I'd say is, regardless of government, bureaucracy, or civil society, today education matters right across the country to parents a lot. It wasn't the case 30 years ago. Now, whether it's girls or boys, even in a state like Rajasthan, where Meghalaya and Rajasthan have such a big difference in general, both visibility and participation of women, girls, in addition to girls and boys and parents really want quality education. And that is a big shift. And I think that drives both the bureaucracy and drives civil society and drives government as well. And it's a question of, drives the political lot as well. So that's something one must acknowledge. And I think that even people like Yogendra and Sasha have been caught in the middle of it and have very high expectations. Many of us have seen a change. We also have high expectations, because without education, you can't go anywhere. And with poor quality education, as you said, you cannot manufacture a poor quality report card. Maybe you can manufacture a very good quality report card. But I think the fact that people really want education, so from the point of view of a social movement, I would say that this is something that has become clearer and clearer. And one issue and problem that I'd like to highlight is actually Rajasthan's attempt of government. I mean, even in our country, actually, I'll bring it up with a small incident. As you had mentioned, we are involved with public audits, social audits, and not just in the Employment Guarantee Act, which is where it began, but we try and spread it to many areas. We were visited by a group of international auditors, supreme audit institutions, those who are in the CAGs of more than 40 countries from across the globe. And they came to a place called Kumbhalgarh, where we held a kind of a public audit, and children themselves spoke. And child after child said, we don't want anything else. We just want teachers. We just don't have teachers to teach. How will we do anything else? Yes, we don't have toilets. Yes, we don't have infrastructure. Yes, we don't have playgrounds, but we want teachers, because these were the questions we had raised. And they were shocked. Those auditors were shocked. And then in the middle of that, we just asked one question. How many of you who are senior, they were almost the senior most auditors of their country, how many of you have studied in a government school? And out of the 40, 39 put up their hands as having studied in a government school. Only one had studied in a private school, and that was the Indian auditor in that team. So I think that brings about this very, very stark difference. When Yogendra says that whether it's the World Bank or any other institution or even capitalist countries, without a strong public education, you cannot get anywhere. And that is the state and civil society saying that it is a responsibility of the state to make sure at least primary and secondary education is of quality and is of a standard, and everyone gets equal access to it. And it is much higher than what any private institution can produce. Later on, we'll talk about how we ourselves got into this and understood how much people interact with this and how a large campaign got built. But this is something that I think in Rajasthan, there is a need for education, but too much energy is going into the private education sector. And people like Yogendra outside government also are pushing government. Bureaucrats are, and there is an improvement, but there's a long, long way to go. And it's without people putting pressure on our government system, we'll never be able to change.
Right. I think the stories from Rajasthan can be so inspiring, and we also have some videos, I think, which we can share with the audience at this point of time to get a sense of some of those things that have happened in Rajasthan that has pushed it forward. So if we can play that video now.
हम आपके सामने ये कहना चाहते हैं कि आज तक है ना 7 साल से 10 स्कूल में हमेशा टीचर की कमी रही, क्योंकि लड़कियों ने आज तक कभी अपनी है ना बात किसी के सामने रखी ही नहीं। मैम ने सबने बहुत कोशिश की, पर भी कोई अध्यापक नहीं आते हैं। इस वजह से है ना हम सबने हड़ताल कर दी आज,
क्योंकि गांधी जी बोलते कि अपना हक मांगो, वही हमने दिन सबसे खास समझा और उसी दिन को हमने हड़ताल की।
प्रिंसिपल आपके हैं क्या?
प्रिंसिपल नहीं है।
कितने साल से?
8 साल।
8 साल से जहाँ प्रिंसिपल नहीं हो। अभी आपकी कुल टीचर कितनी है? गणित के हैं क्या? भूगोल के? संस्कृत के? और हिंदी के?
इंस्पेक्टर अंकल आते हैं तो हमको डराते हैं कि ज्यादा मत बोलो वरना थाने में डाल दे, तुम थाने में डालने नहीं, सारी उम्र नौकरी नहीं मिलेगी ऐसे तो मैंने भी मतलब हमने भी उनको मुंह तोड़ जवाब दिया कि आप कैसे डाल दोगे, कोई किसी को इतना अधिकार नहीं।
आप फालतू का टाइम वेस्ट नहीं करें, जो भी सब्जेक्ट आपके पास है उसको तैयारी करें। जिसका टीचर नहीं आ रहा है तो उसकी तो तैयारी आपको हो जाएगी, लेकिन जो पढ़ रहे हैं उनको तो याद करो, वो भी आ जाएगा तो आप वो है उसको भूल जाओगे।
अनिता कुमारी चाह के जो से मैथमेटिक्स की टीचर है उसके आदेश जारी करवा दीजिए और सपोर्ट कल वो ज्वाइन कर देंगे। आज नहीं कर पाएगी कहीं आप ये बात पकड़ लेना करनी, आज
नहीं पूरा होगी 4 बजे
कल वो ज्वाइन करेगी
तो कल
और आदेश हमारे पास आ गया
कल कितने टीचर गणित की आ रही है ना, इसका मतलब कल 4 टीचर आ रहे
हैं। आपस में मिले जुल कर पर बुरे ना सिखा देना, हमें आपस में मिले जुल कर पर बुरे ना सिखा देना। हमारा कर्म हो सेवा, हमारा धर्म हो।
That's a powerful film, and I think I would like to ask Kharjana as a member of a students' union and somebody who has traveled across Meghalaya. Can you share with us and the audience about the reality of schools in our state?
Can I say a little bit, Angela? Just one minute, just before Raymond, just a minute to give a context. This lot of girls came to us. That's what I mean by people's hunger for education, children's hunger for education. They came to us saying, we are going to go on strike. And we said, why should children go on strike? And they said, nobody cares for us. You people go on so many strikes. Are you willing to help us or not? That led us into a huge campaign, which we'll talk about later. But it led eventually, they locked the doors, the gates of their school. And they made those teachers come there. And because of that, and a combination with a media house, which kept spreading this news, that as you do talabandi, then teachers get posted. They were posting, picking up from here and posting there, but nevertheless, it was working. And there were 500 schools in that state that went on strike in one complete wave, even while the government was struggling. And the additional DG of police told me, you know, this campaign that you're running, we presented a picture to the cabinet of how many strikes there are all over. And we've said, do not appoint more constables, just appoint teachers so that we can get this headache off our head. So I think as a students' union, if this can become a students' movement, there's nothing more powerful than people asking for their own things. So I just wanted to give how we were driven actually by people in this.
Yeah, so Kharjana, lada pilong ban batai kandiat pangki school mo kumbang yoi. I'll lapse into Khasi. I apologize to our other panelists, but I think we need to get a sense of the actual reality of the schools in terms of infrastructure as well as in terms of teachers. You know, so if you can talk about it a little. And
that was a very powerful video. I think we are familiar to such similar scenario. The only difference is that in Rajasthan it was the school students protest who came out on the street, whereas in our state it is the teachers came out on the street demanding for the rights. Okay, coming to your question, as I pointed earlier, all the what as a state we are lacking in school system. If I may just state the National Academic Survey 2017, which says that 26% of class 3, 25% of class 5, and 31% of class 8 students find it very difficult to travel to school, mostly in rural areas. And 83% of class 3, 79% of class 5, and 64% of class 8 students doesn't understand what the teacher says in class. We also have complaints. According to the National Academic Survey, where teachers complain, 21% of teachers complain lack of toilet facilities. 40% of teachers complain where there is lack of drinking water. 39% of teachers complain lack of electricity. So I think these are all the that the government should address. Should address if we want our education system in the state to improve.
Yeah, so true about toilets. You know, my child goes to a government school in Shillong City, supposed to be one of the best. She's in class 10 now, and for the 10 years, we have just been debating about the state of toilets, and things have not improved. And that is in Shillong. So you can imagine in the other parts of Meghalaya. And it's so true, you know, that teachers' rights and their payments are so bad that they have to continuously come out on the streets to demand pending dues, etc. So maybe even on this, if you get Yogendra ji and Sasha can tell us about how you manage to motivate teachers and to ensure that teachers also, you know, see education as something which they are responsible for, and they manage to sort of push it ahead and up. Can you tell us something about that? Because, you know, in Meghalaya, even in terms of appointment of teachers, we had a white ink education scam, which has still not concluded. And that also has led to a lot of lack of teachers, because there was a whole chunk that was disqualified and exams were then not held and all of that. So have you had similar scams in appointments and issues with teaching and teachers?
In fact, coming to that point, while listening about Meghalaya scenario, I would like to say bring certain aspect regarding if we want to compare the two states with reference to access and infrastructure developments are concerned. In fact, Rajasthan has one another very important feature, that we have witnessed a very proactive civil society over many decades. Those have steered or initiated or led mass mobilization for education, and definitely simultaneously they have been engaged in evolving a proper type of educational discourse or educational development or models of innovations in Rajasthan. So Rajasthan has led, at least in this aspect of civil society leading in terms of innovations in the elementary education. So it has its own impact on what happened in Rajasthan over the last 4 or 5 decades. Another thing is a national phenomenon, that we all were educated in a common sort of schools. So there were only public schools while we were studying in schools. Last 50 years, the nation has witnessed a transformation in this scenario. Now we have differentiated school systems. We evolved a very big private school system, which has now at least have 50% of enrollment so far as school-going children are concerned, and only 50% are left to the public school system. The 50% who are enrolled in the public school system are from the general masses, who are generally deprived, marginalized, or within many aspects of life or life situations. So that is an aspect which this whole transformation can be see a characterization of this transformation in this sense. Another aspect is that even the private school system has its own hierarchy, or it has its own type of differentiation within itself. We have elite private schools, which are there from last 4, 5, 6 decades. But over last 2 decades, we have seen a mushrooming of low-fee private schools, which are generally responding to a scenario or are being made possible only because of a general dissatisfaction in the lower section of the society with the performance of the government schools. People don't have even capacity to pay 100 rupee, 200 rupee per month for their children's education, still they prefer to send their children to the private schools, which are in no way, in any sort of situation better than the government schools. But the general perception of the people, even at the grassroots level, even among the very poorest people, is that the government system is non-performing. So that is the reason why we have now almost 80% private schools are located nearby or side by side to the government schools run in the either you see in the urban slums or in the rural area of Rajasthan. So that's another factor which one need to understand. It's also saying a lot about the performance of government schools. So I am bringing this point of the paradox of the scenario that we have witnessed a high increase in enrollment, definitely very desirable access parameters, all more with the effort of or a very integrated effort of the state and at the national level. Now we have almost 30 years of schemes which are directly working national programs, national flagship programs which are directly working on the universalization of primary education funded centrally. I am very surprised why things are like that in Meghalaya. They don't have schools or the children out of so big number of children out of schools, while even the RT Act, which has now mandated and being implemented and being supported by the state and the central government to provide a school for each and every child within the periphery of the 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers. So that sort of a big move on the part or with the aim of universalizing primary education or creating schools for each and every child in their neighborhood is we generally have the feeling that everywhere in the country it must be happening. At least it happened in Rajasthan. So now the number of schools and the children enrolled, the percentage of children enrolled in the schools is definitely very high. And this is the main feature of the transformation, that you have schools and you have children enrolled in the schools, either in the private school or in the government school. But this whole story has its own inner side, that generally what each and every sincere research, a proper research about the learning outcomes or academic outcomes in general at the primary level, elementary level or secondary level of schooling are very, very horrifying. And we are seeing a trend that there is not improvement in the outcomes, but we are witnessing a continuous decline in the outcomes of the school systems. So on the one hand, they are progressing very high. They are attaining very high numbers. So far, enrollment is concerned, number of teachers are concerned, number of schools are concerned, and they are able to provide these things. But so far as the real learning is concerned, we as a educational organization working with the masses in Rajasthan last 4 decades, we really quite worried about this situation, which is being propagated as something progressing very, very well, or moving towards a very desirable direction. But within it's very hollow. It's a very hollow and terrifying situation that generally children who are enrolled in schools are not learning. They are enrolled in schools, but they are not being educated, they are not learning. And this phenomenon has now grown out of proportion, and it has become very strong and very, very, very difficult to address. So one aspect I would like to state initially, and but simultaneously, we have all reasons to state that from many sides, from the government, from the civil society, from parents, we have just seen a video where girls are being, and I think the girls are from a very since the number is a good number of girls students are there, so it must be a location somewhere, a block headquarter or district headquarter of Rajasthan. If a district or block headquarter of Rajasthan having a girls' school don't have more than 3 teachers over many years, so we can even understand what is the actual state of affairs, and it has its own imbalances. You might see some schools, or in general, the number of teachers appointed in the schools might be very fine, but their placement is very lopsided. You will have schools in remote habitations, in the distant rural places, which have very less number of teachers appointed, and the others you have out of proportion teachers in urban centers, or the schools run in urban centers. That's another aspect. But over the last few decades, there has been a concerted effort at least after IIT Act, that let us wake up and start doing certain things to improve the scenario. And Rajasthan's story is a parallel endeavor in this very miserable situation, to come out of it and do a concerted collaborative effort by the government officials, teachers, civil society, parents, panchayat raj systems. So whatsoever type of change or waves of change we are witnessing, we are quite hopeful, and we are mainly basing on those strides that things can change and we can collaborate. And if we collaborate and work together, then there's definitely these big challenges can be addressed, or we start addressing these challenges, or at least stating this situation in a right way. And there are quarters in the society, in the government, and largely in the with the parents, who are now able to understand this discourse, and they are worried, and this worry will bring definitely their energy to come out and join hands together to see that these things should change. Things should change. And rightly, I would like to say that mainly now discourse has now shifted and should be shifted towards the quality of education. In Rajasthan, there is no question of access to the schools, but now the question that is the real question: the schools should be teaching and children should be learning. And in this worry, we are happy to state that when we very honestly, very genuinely discussed it with the teachers community, so we always found a great echo and a great synergy, and a way of listening and understanding and concern from the teachers community. And so one also try to correct the cynicism that there is issue, but there are ways and there are hopes. And if a real discourse on the issue of quality can be raised or mobilized across the society, teachers can lead this situation. The government teachers can lead this situation of transformation. It is a story what we did while for 4 years. We collaborated with the government of Rajasthan in their program called State Initiative for Quality Education. And while after few years, we were surprised by the leadership and enthusiastic endeavors provided by the principal teachers for taking this agenda of understanding the present scenario, accepting it very clearly, and then coming up upfront to change it. So that's how Rajasthan actually gives us a very real story. The real story has reality has always is multifaceted. It's not white and black. It's very different. It's contexts. So the participation of civil society with the government and teachers being on the forefront, if they take this agenda with the parents and communities, where they are able to mobilize community, they are able to go in the masses and the school communities, real transformation starts happening. So that set of situation we witnessed in Rajasthan.
So I think it's true about the need to bring in civil society and parents and teachers. But also, if I may address this question to both Raymond as well as Nikhil. Raymond, why do you think that in Meghalaya there is some sort of resistance to implementation of the RTE, which perhaps is one of the causes of why we're unable to better our school system, including regulating of private schools? We know that every time when the admissions come around the corner, the KSU always raises the issue about fees, about access, about admissions, but it hasn't led to a systemic change where there is something concrete. There seems to be a big resistance to the RTE here and its implementation. So what is the reason? And also, how easy or how difficult it will be to bring in civil society actors? And after you give us your thoughts on that, perhaps Nikhil can then address this whole issue of how civil society has played a role in Rajasthan, and so that we get pointers of how we can mobilize civil society in Meghalaya.
I don't think that such kind of resistance for implementing of RTE in the state of Meghalaya. And with regards to the private school, I think it is a need of the hour that the policy should come up to regulate the private schools and institutions. The union which is concerned has time and again written on a price, as you have said, price the government, the concerned department, authority, but no solution has come up till date. So as I was saying, that a policy that regulates not only the government or government aided, but also a policy that regulates private school is the need of the hour.
Right. So maybe you can come in and tell us how.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time because I'd like to also leave some time for questions. But I'll just say one thing. I think civil society in Rajasthan was very multifaceted, as Yogendra said. There are education experts, there are others from outside. But during this big campaign we had, it's a very interesting, I think you can do it almost anywhere in the country, where we asked one question: how many of you agree that those who are in government should mandatorily have their children enrolled in government schools? Otherwise, they should be asked to leave their jobs. And we got, out of 33 districts where we went, hundreds of meetings where people were signing on these things, 98% people said we should lay down that law and rule that every government servant must teach their children, and that will immediately lead to an improvement. Now, that's a very simplistic thing, but it's very indicative that we have double standards, and therefore we've let our government system go to seed. But I think Sasha also wanted to say something, and if we can leave time for questions, I'd rather do that than come in now. So, yeah.
Discussion. We have to understand the kind of cynicism which has been growing around the public education system is actually also shared by the government teachers, and the government functionaries themselves. And there are many reasons for it, which one needs to recognize. And I think that was one good thing that happened in Rajasthan while trying to from an administrative point of view, trying to fix the structural situation of the education system. That system itself very openly started accepting the situation, rather going around the problems. It said that we do have a problem, because if you look at the structural change story of Rajasthan, it actually didn't start from the primary school. It started from secondary schools. And when I'm just looking at the data, in 2014, we had a situation where we had 40% vacancies vacant of principals. As far as lecturers are concerned, you will be surprised, 55% of vacancies were vacant. The grade 2 teachers, we had 30% of vacancies vacant. And we had elementary grade teachers, 52%. and the system started very openly talking about how can we fix this and how can we fix this quick, and it's immediately started taking some action. So what happened by that is that teachers felt confident that government is looking at the very basic issue, so they also opened up about the issue of quality improvement, changes in the teaching and learning process. So therefore, from an administrative point of view, definitely a kind of pressure has to be exerted from the civil society, the parents and the children. But the administration has also has to understand how it has to go about the entire process of change. And luckily, the way it happened in Rajasthan, there was an openness in the administration, and administration could actually bring this point of discussion. So with this background, whenever we went for discussions, for trainings, for orientations, we could always say, see that there is a reform, and the basic situation at the ground level structurally is improving, and the state is committed to it. So I just wanted to bring about this point that we also need to understand that how to address the cynicism of the people in the department itself, and it's a finer point, and somehow administration only reacts in a very negative manner, and these departments have to come out of it and have to openly embrace the situation, create a political will, and then immediately innovate around the issues to address the structural problems. Otherwise, many quality initiatives might be implemented and they will go down the drain. So we have to create an acceptability also.
Yeah, although I think when people put pressure, even the administration changes in a far more open way, and if pressure comes from above. We often think pressure from above will change things. When people put pressure, the administration is forced to actually embrace that change because they know their time is up unless they do. So
yeah, I guess we need to constantly be vigilant and keep, asking the questions. And even in that sense, we need to decentralize not just the school systems, but also our struggles. Like, for instance, the KSU can struggle, but then we need to have groups at the village level constantly monitoring, constantly looking that, the management committees, the schools are running the way they should be. I think we have another film which is very inspiring, but maybe before that we can end with that, so that we get a clue of maybe how to move forward. But maybe we can begin taking some questions because I can see the clock ticking. So you can see some of the questions that pop up on the screen. Any of you can perhaps address it. Here's one which says that the state government should take up steps to bring together all schools under one state monitoring platform. What do you have to say about this? Any of you? Yogendra ji, will it help? Because I'll tell you, in Meghalaya especially, the same thing. People think that private schools are better than government schools because, it is true that especially in the rural areas, the infrastructure, the teaching, everything is a bit in question. But that has meant a huge migration from the villages. It has meant that an escalation in terms of even the cost of education, because they have to hire a house here, they have to, so will it help to actually come up with a system where you bring all these schools, and doesn't the RTE itself mandate something like this?
It's a double-edged sword. Yeah. And so far as the provision and the facilities should be provided by the government for the education of each and every child is concerned, one will definitely like to be behind this slogan and see the situation if we can mobilize for that. We have a different opinion that putting all controls in the hand of a centralized bureaucratic system of the state will be very hazardous and very distorting, maybe very even difficult for the real progress of education. So far as generally what is the thinking, at least in the movements which are being thinking with the progressive orientation or pro-people orientation. Even we have certain doubts, certain issues we raised while there was the promulgation of the RT Act, that the RT Act has given all the sole authority to the government institutions to decide the curriculum, the pedagogy, and the norms and the form of education and institutions. And so they captured the whole arena, and that means that they push out all all others from this discourse, or their ability to influence, or their ability to experiment, innovate, and suggest and participate in real issues of deliberation and decisions making. So, giving all controls to government, they are trying it very hard that they should be in their hands, and thinking their uniform system should be run by the government is, in my opinion, is anti-education. Education cannot be uniform. It should always be innovating. It should always be questioning. It should always be reforming, and this capacity should be within the education institutions. So if you give it to a state to control everything and decide everything, you might have a state for some time which is not the way the people are needing or society need. They might be really reflecting, really representing that need. In that situation, I think we should also be, in our opinion, in opinion with our both fellows in civil society of Rajasthan, that we really are for the autonomy of the education institutions, or autonomy of education discourse, enough space for inventing, for experimenting, and taking different perspectives, and they should be allowed for that. While such laws like RT Act, which has that very different formulation, that only government institutions, which everybody is knowing about their diets, their SIRT, their directorates, how they work, and what is their ability to lead this discourse or need of the contemporary times. So if you say only their words will be final words, and there will be nothing, and it will be a legal mandate. So legal mandating in education is very dangerous proposition, I think. But on the other hand, provisioning and providing resources, mobilizing financial resources, support is the responsibility of the state. And it should be handed over to the competent civil society or educational academic institutions which enjoy enough autonomy as the education institution should have it. So it's a very tricky question and very tricky problem to respond.
I'll just add one point to what he just said. I mean, this word, this centralized monitoring system. I mean, what do we mean by it? You know, it's just such a heavy loaded vocabulary. I mean, if you look at the Rajasthan story, it did create create a monitoring system which is more or less centralized, but at the same time, it gave autonomy at the panchayat level to it created a new constituency called Panchayat Elementary Education Officer, which would look at all the administrative part and how the resources are allocated, how teachers are allocated in that area, and it will have a final say on the issue. So there was a centralized system not to interfere, but to give a feedback. You need some system of reviewing, you need to understand how things are going vis-a-vis one area and in any other area, but how do you structure it, how do you look at it? So sometimes what happens that these words get thrown in the discourse, and at the same administration would just simply take it up, and so we need to be very careful when we put these kind of suggestions. But at the very fundamental level, even the provisioning and allocation, the say and the demand has to come from the ground, and the policy has to respond. It has to be a responsive policy making situation, not a provisioning, as per se the way it has been practiced till now. So that's what, in my experience or in our experience, has worked better and has served the problems that we have. So that's what I just wanted to add.
It's only when you decentralize, you give the autonomy to all stakeholders, then a real unity, a real mobilization for a strength of people comes for creating a new type of systems.
Yeah. So Nikhil, I mean, picking up from that, I think the point we need to touch on is this, the role of the local self-governments. Here the shnongs, the village level, we don't have the panchayat system, but we still have, our darbar shnongs. What can be their role, in improving education?
I was saying that there are no panchayats, but there is a huge sense of community. So, which we don't see as much in other parts of the country. So one has to build on one's own strengths. And there is a very important part of, even in those community institutions, to have a sense of accountability to every member of that community, because that is something that's a part of our democratic framework that is very, very sacred and something that we must build upon. I think from our lessons over many years, I think an idea of public monitoring, public audits, social audits, even in education, is something that's fantastic if we can all move it. I think if the Khasi Students Union and we were to talk, and something, a body like that were to take up a campaign right through the year to go to primary schools and say, we will, along what we did in a campaign in Rajasthan, if we have time for that film, but anyway, is that padhe likhe log, people who had been to schools and colleges and were privileged, went back to the primary schools who haven't had a chance, to say that we need an equal right to education, and that sense of community building up amongst young people and youth. So if the groups like the Khasi Student Union or your own, or Tur or others were to run, we did a bus through Rajasthan, which is a huge state. I can imagine how much fun it would be to take buses and jeeps through the state of Meghalaya and its beauty, and go and say to each school, we will make sure that it reaches a certain standard, and that the community makes. Even private schools, people are so scared of the administration. So parents and communities must be able to own that school and say, we want this kind of result from the school. We want to be a part of it. That is real autonomy. And somewhere, yes, teachers also are far too powerful in many parts of the country, and they have to be answerable to the community itself. So I think that's something. I just want to say one thing before the show ends, because I'm worried about that, is today in the scenario of COVID and online learning, that has become an ultimate method of inequality. Those who have access to online, we are so-called doing online and some scratchy form of online learning, and many people don't have access, and poorer people have even less access, and online is not face-to-face, it is not teaching, it is not learning. And even if we want to improve this, I think we need to be sure that today we also take that into account, that at a time of COVID, we cannot switch into this business of lots of things online and at home. The school is a socializing influence. The school brings many communities together. The school, and particularly non-private schools, are a place where we can conceive of an India together. So it has a lot of learning in many other ways. I agree that learning should be there, but we cannot afford to lose 2 years, 3 years of not even having that space. It's just something I wanted to mention.
So true, Nikhil. Even we are very worried about the pandemic as well as post-pandemic situation of what happens with education. So much more to talk about, like whether it's really possible to change our pedagogic system, syllabus. We know, people here in the region always have this angst, which is true also, that the kind of syllabus that is there completely ignores the region, our own local histories. Our own children are not taught our own local histories. So much more to discuss, and as T7 I think has a intention of having more discussions on education because it's something important. But if we can just watch this film, because I think it's really important, and I think Raymond, it is possible that, you know, we take some of these ideas that Nikhil and Sasha and Yogendra ji have said, and nginya pun kiwen bet banya pen bhai nika education na benta ki khon jongi ngimla aman chui sa akom ne. So we'll watch this film, and hopefully after that we'll just come with you know, one line each of closing this show. So can we play the film, please?
ये सब स्कूल का ढांचा बिगड़ रहा है। यहाँ बच्चे भी सही ढंग से पढ़ा नहीं रहे, सही ढंग से पोषण नहीं चल रहा। ये कोई स्कूल का कोई ढांचा नहीं है। लड़कों को तो कुछ आता नहीं है। अभी 8वीं का नया जो लड़का है तो उसको बुलाओ, इंग्लिश में 100 तक गिनती बुलाओ और 200 तक बुलाओ तो बोल भी नहीं सकेगा।
अच्छा, कौन-कौन से सब्जेक्ट पढ़ाए जाते हैं
स्कूल में? सब्जेक्ट तो मतलब अभी टीचर आए उसके हिसाब से पढ़ाए जाते हैं।
टीचर आते हैं हर रोज? नहीं आते टीचर। तो मम्मी को कभी बताया कि घर में?
शिक्षा का सवाल अभियान was a campaign started by the SR Abhiyan and Rajasthan Patrika to address the state of government schools across Rajasthan. Volunteers underwent a training and were then sent to all of Rajasthan's districts to collect information on 6 basic issues. Clean drinking water, a suitable playground with a boundary wall, separate and functional toilets for boys and girls, school management committee and school development plan, sanctioned posts versus actual number of teachers, student enrollment versus student dropouts. The volunteers also made their community aware of their rights under the Right to Education Act and encouraged them to gather information about their schools by filing RTIs.
आप इस स्कूल के जैसे जो भी 6 चीजें हैं, ग्राउंड होना चाहिए, खेल का मैदान होना चाहिए, पंप होना चाहिए, पानी होना चाहिए, उस पे आप सरकार को प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं।
The campaign then took out a 100-day accountability yatra from the 1st of December 2015 to the 10th of March 2016. They organized public gatherings in every district, aiming to register grievances and file RTIs with the RTI on Wheels vehicle. They would then meet with the district magistrate and raise those issues. The campaign aims to put into effect an accountability law that holds the government officials accountable in case of non-delivery of services. This would in turn help in improving the state of education in Rajasthan.
That's again a powerful film, and I think that thank you to T7 for giving us 10 minutes extra, but if all our panelists would like to say a word before we close. Yogendra ji, your parting words.
Our few decades is that transformation can only happen by collaboration between the student, teachers and parents and system at large. So that can, by bringing the synergy of all stakeholders, is the key for real transformation. And real transformation is the transformation in the quality of learning for every child. That's how we generally understand, and we try to work for that.
I'll just say, add to what he just said, that I think the whole issue of equity in learning and needs a lot of re-emphasis now, especially in the post-COVID arena. And generally, what we have found that if there is an open discourse, people do understand the whole idea of equity, and that cannot come until unless real accountability, openness is there from every side, and then they decide together to bring change. But how state and bureaucracy, civil society, everyone together can create that situation, one has to arrive at that level of synergy. So that is something which I feel is the very key of unlocking this issue. Yeah.
You are also aware of the very big role that an adversarial situation sometimes plays to help create a synergy. I think there are various things that need to be done. We are mobilizers on transparency and accountability. You are, we are. We've seen the value of that. I think today the sun rises in India and Meghalaya and sets in Rajasthan. I think you brought a very wide discussion together, even in an area of education. But the factors are that education matters, whether on east or west, regardless of whether you're panchayats or don't have. That transparency matters, accountability matters, and people's monitoring matters. I think if we can do that, we can certainly learn lots from you, you from us. That's what our learning is about. And if Khasi Students Union, TUR, and T7 itself come together, I know what a big role just getting together with a media organization played in spreading the word. So T7's very big role, and congratulations to them for doing this program as well. And I think people who are experts in the education sector, because they tend to be very within themselves. I think if we all get together, there are some fundamental shifts that can be made, have to be made. There's no choice.
Yes.
Raymond. No matter what the PGI report or where our state stand at the PGI report, I would like to appreciate the education department, different institutions, the Bhushan, for keeping the ball of education rolling during this period of the pandemic. And at the end, I can only say that for improving or transforming the education, such a huge and large sector, it's not possible for a single person or a single entity. But I think we all should come and collaborate together so that the education system in the state will improve.
So I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Hope we can meet again. So much more to discuss. Ti paralog ngakharai nila banwan lam ka jingkala haka liang ka puli puthi haka jela jongi but ni hapan ya trailang nadu ki ki pa ki khna ki khilong ki dorbar shnong ki management committee but khamtam ki civil society ka bamut manu mo ki bri ki ba khmi ki ba pet ya ka puli puthi but let's say ngidi bania sedang kentu yaki sang samla yaki sang kentai ba komungio ihot ko film let's say ngila ban sedang dah balik ko yatra ban le check ban le pet ikini ki school jongi but bam numya darab job re ban ya kran bet kum bakalong namar la dangi kwa ban penbha pen bet tingi hap kran choy ka jing shisha ka badon but nang tu ngin saya ya chkhmat ban ngin ya trailang the kubleshi boni pi baro. Thank you once again to all of you and hope we meet again. Stay safe. Thank you.